Hey everyone, welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something that is, well, it's honestly one of the most hotly debated yet totally misunderstood aspects of high-end watchmaking. We're talking about movement finishing and why it actually matters. Let's just jump right in.
So here's the million-dollar question, and I mean literally $1 million sometimes, depending on the watch. Does great movement finishing automatically mean you've got a great watch? Like, if a movement is mechanically kind of mediocre, but it's just beautifully crafted and decorated, does that still count as haute horlogerie? Or is that just putting pure vanity and decoration above actual engineering? It's a really fascinating tension, right? Because it strikes right at the core of why we even collect and admire these mechanical timepieces in the first place. Take a look at this quote from a Hodinkee community member. It just perfectly frames the whole debate. For the modernist collector out there paying this massive premium for what is essentially a pretty machine, it just feels a bit wrong. To them, a modern watch should be all about cutting-edge engineering and absolute precision. So from that angle, traditional finishing, it seems totally superfluous. But is it actually?
Okay, Section 1, the beauty myth, form versus function.
It's so easy to fall for this beauty myth, you guys. Modernists often look at decoration as this kind of outdated relic. They think, early watchmakers didn't have any real engineering innovations, so they just idled away the hours, giving their movements this jewel-like appearance purely out of vanity. But looking at the history, that was absolutely not the case. Historically, form and function were completely indistinguishable from each other.
Which brings us to Section 2, a history of necessity and the evolution of craft.
Let's actually track this evolution. Going way back to 1525, early table clocks had these very plain, unadorned iron movements. But as machines shrank down into portable watches, makers swapped iron for brass to fight off corrosion. Fast forward to 1761, and you've got John Harrison's H4 chronometer. This thing was incredibly precise, and it featured incredibly elaborate engraving. Then, by 1809, Breguet's number 1176 watch used fire gilding to protect the metal, along with blued steel. Why the change? Well, as these portable machines became more precise, the immense human effort required to make those parts accurate just naturally started to look like art.
And it's really interesting to see how closely a 16th century watch resembles a fine firearm from the exact same era. Think of Peter Peck's wheel-lock pistol made for Emperor Charles V. Both of these things were craft-produced, one-off mechanical marvels for ultra-wealthy clients. Back then, if you created a highly complex machine for an emperor, extreme fluid ornamentation wasn't just a nice little bonus. It was standard practice. You were expected to make it look the part.
All right, Section 3, form follows friction, the physics of time.
But as watches slowly transition from being royal toys to crucial everyday timekeepers, the actual physics of time really came into play. I absolutely love this quote from horological writer Walt Odets. The big takeaway here is this. Inside a watch movement, mechanical parts are literally constantly trying to destroy each other through friction. It's wild. The finish on those parts isn't just cosmetic. It essentially dictates the survival of the machine.
So yeah, these techniques are definitely not just for show. Take bluing and polishing steel. That literally retards corrosion. But even more crucially, when you smooth out the microscopic, jagged burrs on a piece of metal, you drastically reduce friction. If you leave a surface rough, those parts will actually grind each other to dust. And then they deposit that particulate debris right into the rest of the movement, basically destroying the watch from the inside out. Even those beautiful Geneva stripes, they've been noted to help catch and trap stray dust and debris. How cool is that?
To get really specific here, what we are talking about are the working surfaces. We're talking gear teeth, pinion leaves, reset hammers. By finishing these specific areas to a flawless mirror polish, historically, watchmakers reduced frictional losses to an absolute minimum. This is what ensured mechanical longevity. It was quite literally an anti-friction technology born entirely out of necessity.
Moving on to Section 4, industrial versus artisanal movements, a modern contrast.
Today, we're looking at a pretty stark contrast in the watch world. On one hand, you have modern industrial movements from heavy hitters like Rolex and Omega. They're achieving unbelievable chronometry using machine-milled parts and high-tech silicon springs. But then, on the other hand, you have these incredible artisanal makers like Patek Philippe or Kari Voutilainen who are actively preserving centuries-old techniques. They're out there hand-polishing parts with actual boxwood, maintaining this incredibly high degree of human touch.
Let's zoom in on that modernist arsenal for a second. Brands like Rolex are actually using materials derived from the semiconductor industry.
They've got things like paramagnetic hairsprings and nickel phosphorus escapements, which, by the way, is really just a fancy way of saying these parts are totally immune to magnetic fields and practically frictionless. Thanks to perfect machine milling, Rolex hits their superlative chronometer standards, meaning perfectly accurate timekeepers that entirely bypass the functional need for traditional hand finishing. They absolutely do not need a watchmaker sitting on a bench with a tiny stick of pithwood to make the watch accurate or durable anymore.
In total contrast, let's look at the traditionalist's craft. You have watchmakers painstakingly hand-forming balance springs, meticulously adjusting microscopic ruby pallets over an open flame with shellac, or manually poising, or balancing, a wheel. Honestly, from a purely technical, rigid standpoint, doing things the hard way like this is arguably inferior to just using a modern semiconductor. But, you know what? That is entirely missing the point. These old-school methods aren't just about timekeeping anymore. They represent this intrinsic, incredibly direct human connection to the machine itself.
Which leads us to our final section, Section 5, the true value of craft, well beyond timekeeping. 60. According to an analysis by WatchTime, 60 is the maximum number of individual steps that Patek Philippe takes just to finish his single, tiny, inconspicuous wheel hidden deep inside one of their movements. 60 painstakingly manual steps for a part you will likely never, ever see. It is almost beautifully irrational, isn't it?
So what should we all really take away from this explainer? Well, the reality is that while a mass-produced machine-finished watch will keep absolutely perfect time and probably outlast us all, true high-grade hand finishing communicates something much deeper. It signals an ultimate dedication to horological tradition. It tells the owner, hey, an incredible amount of extreme care, raw human effort, and historical design went into executing this watch. It is literally a bridge to the past, kept alive right there on your wrist.
Which leaves us with this final thought. In an age where perfectly precise, machine-milled accuracy is practically available to anyone, is the imperfection, the painstaking labor, and that direct human touch actually the ultimate luxury? It really challenges us to reconsider what we truly value in high-end watchmaking. Anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep asking those tough questions, keep looking closely at your pieces, and I'll see you next time.